Well, hello, everybody. It's David Leis here, your proud host of Leaders on the Frontier Live. And good afternoon, everybody. It's terrific to see everybody coming into the studio here and to our audience in particular. We're very excited about our conversation today because we care about our country on August, what is it, August the 21st, the year of our Lord. And it is remarkable that we are seeing kind of towards the ends of the summer, and I hope you and your families are having a terrific summer. It's an important time not only for ourselves to rest, but for reconnecting with family and friends and being able to explore this incredible country from coast to coast. So, good afternoon, Prairie, Kenzie, Luke, Matthew. I mean, it just goes on and on. So, thank you very much for joining us and so many others. And it's interesting, the other day, I was asked a question about Canada's official motto. And so I thought I'd share that with you. I think it's kind of inspired, and maybe it will help inspire us today as we work to renew this country together. Canada's national motto is a Amari Usk and Marie, Latin for from sea to sea, which is taken from Psalm 72:8. And he, the king, shall have dominion also from sea to sea and from the river unto the ends of the earth. And by the way, that psalm is on the Peace Tower in Ottawa, as a point of fact, among many other references. So, boy, someone was really thinking about trying to build this incredible country from sea to sea to sea. And by the way, I got that fact from an interesting book I got years ago called Now You Know Canada, 150 Years of Fascinating Facts by Doug Lennox. So good job, Doug Lennox. I hope you enjoy Canadian history as much as I do. But it's important that we remember our history. And if we think of our history, remember of great projects that built this country together, whether it was the CPR, whether it was the settlement right across the country, working with all kinds of people, including Aboriginal people, to people from every part of the world. It's really a remarkable story. So that's the spirit in which we talk about issues here on Leaders on the Frontier, and we're really grateful for you joining us today. We look forward to your questions. I've got two extraordinary guests. I'm so fortunate. I have just, I think, very insightful people who join us to share their wisdom, their experience in terms of building this country. And so we've got a lot of headlines, and I'm going to do something a little bit different here. And just before I dive into those headlines, I'm going to reflect on some comments from our audience, and we get thousands of them. Great conversation. Keep doing what you are doing. I have truly enjoyed it, and this is from this name, Adam Prass 3655. So thank you so much for that comment. And thank you for fighting for those that need your expertise. And that's from Sandy Reed. Thank you, Sandy. We really appreciate those comments. So keep them coming. And I will tell you, one of the highlights of our discussions is the audience points and questions. So I'm going to just invite our panel to join me because we've got some really interesting news points. And I think they all go to the point of how do we get this country moving again economically, in many different ways. How do we strengthen this nation? We know that we're, in some respects, a country in decline, whether it's economically or otherwise. Well, what do you think? Is that a fair comment? We try to look at facts and evidence and principles of good public policy. So on that note, I want to invite our guests into the studio here. And I have two great guests, the Honorable Grant Devine, who was the Premier of Saskatchewan. He's been involved in business as also an academic as well. Welcome, Grant.
Nice to be with you. We'll have a great day.
We're going to have a great day, Grant, and I'm so glad you could join us, as well as the Honorable Dan McTeague. And Dan is not only a nice guy, he's also the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. And we've got lots of great conversations. So, Dan, you also served in a past Liberal government with Prime Minister Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. So welcome, Dan.
Good to be here, David, with you and with Grant. I'm looking forward. This is going to be a lot of fun today.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And because, well, let's just dive in here. I've got a couple news pieces here, one of which is you may have heard that the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, was reelected in a seat in Alberta. He lost his seat in the Ottawa area. And there he is with his wife and the MP that stepped aside to let him run in that seat. And I believe the seat's name is Battle River Crowfoot in Alberta. He came in with a mere 80.4% of the vote. And I thought it was very interesting because obviously there was a lot of interesting comments that he made in terms of that seat. And I want to just share with you part of that clip.
And we will secure our borders by putting an end to the Liberal open borders experiment of mass immigration, which has been a disaster. Over the next several years, we need to have more people leaving than coming, so that citizens in Canada can afford homes, can find jobs and health care again. Conservatives welcome lawful, orderly immigration, but it has to be done in our national interest, the right people and in the right numbers. In other words, we will fight to restore an immigration system that puts Canada first.
So that's an interesting clip. I mean, he referenced in his speech many different policy files, not just that one, immigration, but he also cited the need to bring to an end the electric vehicle mandate. He also talked about many things, including the need to cut waste out of the budget. So it went on and on. But I want to ask both of you gentlemen, you've both been elected officials, the significance of that election by the leader of the opposition. Do you want to go first, Dan?
Well, I thought it was very significant that it demonstrates that Pierre Poilievre is not the type of guy who's going to, take defeat as a final sign of leaving. He seems to have resurrected himself, called the Lazarus effect, after the defeat in Ottawa, and we know why a lot of that happened. There's a lot of chicanery and strange mechanisms that allowed people who shouldn't and didn't want to run to suddenly show up and perhaps create a situation where there was some confusion. Nevertheless, I think it's really good that he's really found his feet. And why should he have left? I mean, the man brought more seats to the Conservatives, gave him a very strong opposition, a very strong hand. And, I'm one who's seen him debate. I actually debated him a couple of times. I don't think I lost, but I don't think I won either. I can tell you, he's the best thing the Conservatives have going for themselves. And I think a lot of Canadians are saying, all right, now that we've gotten past Trump, we see what the deal is. Maybe they're going to spend a lot more attention to Pierre Poilievre now that he's going to be around for a while.
Very interesting. What are your comments, Grant?
Well, I certainly congratulate him. I found it interesting that Pierre won his riding, I think, for 20 years. And then they fixed the riding. So, I mean, he didn't have a hope. I mean, a number of immigrants and others in this expanded new riding. And, I mean, it was a slam dunk to defeat him. And it was, I mean, anybody that looked at it closely wondered, how in the world did they pull that off? I mean, I didn't like it. I don't think an awful lot of people like it. And I'd hate to see that kind of stuff happen. But in any event, I think we need a really strong opposition in terms of economic policy. I think Pierre will bring that to the fore, and we'll certainly be giving him advice. I mean, in many ways, I'm hopeful that our new prime minister can stick to his guns and do the kinds of things that certainly people out here would like to see it, particularly in terms of pipelines. I mean, we export energy and food all over the world from the West here. And if you build, SNG pipelines that can take energy to Europe, one, it's good for Europe. It backs out the Russians, and it makes billions of dollars for us in Canada to share the wealth. I mean, so we've been sitting on it. I mean, we have lots to do to make more money. I mean, as Peter Lougheed said to me years and years ago, you have two sides of the coin, right? You've got the side that demands money in health and education, social services. But he said on the other side is where you make your money. And that's in agriculture and energy and oil and gas, et cetera, and mining. And you got to balance those two. Well, we're out of balance right now. We have to encourage the creation of wealth so we have money to spend on the stuff that takes wealth. So we're out of balance. And as an economist, I would say it's time we bring that. And as a politician, I mean, you'd think it would be popular all over the country if we're making more money. And yet we have these policies in many places, as you just mentioned with respect to electric vehicles. I mean, my goodness, we don't export electric vehicles. We export billions of dollars of canola all over the world, 137 countries, making lots of money. And we've got a 75% tariff in China.
No,
I mean,
it's amazing.
I could go on. You got me going here, but I mean, we gotta, wake up and smell the coffee. We're not silly people. We're well educated. I mean, that's anyway. Pardon me, it got me on a roll here, but
no, it's great, Grant. But your point is apropos. We need to get our country moving again, and part of the institution of Parliament is to have a capable opposition. That's why they refer to it as His Majesty's loyal opposition. Within that Parliament is a system that has a checks and balance. It's meant to provide healthy debate that gets at the truth, the facts, the evidence, and that institution needs to be firing on 8 cylinders if we're going to have a strong and free nation. And that's why, I mean, I think that's part of the context in which I'm highlighting this election of the leader of the opposition, so that they can re-enter Parliament and lead the opposition well. I mean, you sat in the federal Parliament and you led the provincial Parliament, Dan and Grant. That's how this system is supposed to work, isn't it, Dan? Like, that's important.
Well, yeah, holding the government's feet to the fire. But what makes this unique is that Pierre Poilievre just a few months ago was holding the government's feet to the fire. Canadians were too busy and distracted with elbows up. Well, now we're going to really find out, in the absence of anything coming from Mark Carney. He's had over 100 days now. We don't see a whole lot happening. We don't see any major projects. We see qualification of what those projects should be. They should be decarbonized. They have to have consensus. All sorts of things that we heard in the past that basically put Canada in the straitjacket it finds itself in, not just with Donald Trump, but economically. And at the same time, I think what we have now is an opportunity for people to finally say, hey, look, you had your fun. You could afford to be trendy and cute, but no, there's something called an economy that's not working very well right now. In fact, it's going in a different direction. I'm on the other side where Grant is. I'm looking at from where my room is here. I can see one of the smokestacks, the paint stack for the Ford plant, which is supposed to be an EV plant. Ford said, to hell with it. We're losing money on EVs. We can't afford these mandates. They're one of the 5 companies that build in Canada and are not prepared to do any more of this because they realize we've backed the wrong horse. Pierre Poilievre is going to be able to hold Mark Carney and the Liberals' feet to the fire, and at the same time prove to Canadians that elbows up was really a moniker for accepting more of the same deterioration of our economy and our standard of living, which I think to most Canadians is absolutely unacceptable, especially given our potential in this world.
Well said. Grant, the parliamentary system, is it important that we get that firing on all 8 cylinders? We need a good opposition, don't we?
Well, we do, and obviously it takes some time, and we have to be patient. I mean, it's not a perfect system, but as I think was it John Kenneth Galbraith and indeed Diefenbaker said, it's way ahead of whatever's in second best. So we do our best to keep it together. We have the opportunity again. I go back and say, I'll be a little harsher here. If Mr. Trudeau was still in power and doing the same thing as Carvey's doing, he'd be extremely unpopular because there's been no real change. I mean, there's lip service, but there's no real change. I mean, so we're banking all this on policies that they talk about, but they're not initiating, and with the same cabinet. The same policies, a little bit of lip service. And so if it's Mr. Carney's personality, well, I hope that that's strong enough to start seeing some creation of economic wealth and some common things. I mean, Canada needs to make more money, and we have the ability to create wealth. As a PhD economist, we look at all the multiplier effects of things that you can build so you have money to spend money. And it's like we've neglected that. We're really good at borrowing. We're really good at spending, but we have to create wealth at the same time. And Canada is blessed with the capacity in oil, gas, agriculture, forestry, mining, potash, all of the things that we can do, as well as manufacturing, to be, really solid economically. So we have the potential, and I think politically we just have to get it together and as a team. And I'm a team player. Played a lot of baseball, and it's the whole team that makes you win the World Series or any other game. So we're in it together. We just hope some real solid economic common sense comes to bear.
Right on. Yeah, we all share the same vision that we want this country to be the freest, most prosperous nation in the world. We've got everything going for it, as you adeptly summed up there, Grant. We just got to get rolling here. So, I think a brass tacks question here is this. Is this the same set of policies? It's been 100 days now with the Carney government, and I want this government to succeed, but am I being too cynical by saying I haven't seen a definitive marker to signal to everybody, including the citizens of Canada, let alone the private sector, that this is a new day? Like, you still got a lot of the same legislation in place here. I think really almost everything that the previous Trudeau government had. Is this just not the same government with just a different guy at the top? What do you say, Dan?
Color me skeptical, but there's no way that we can distinguish Mark Carney from Justin Trudeau. It's the same government. They've made a lot of talk. It's great to talk about these things. Grant Devine, myself, have spent a lot of time as politicians talking a line, but you have to at some point deliver, and there are no deliverables. This guy was supposed to be, the man to get us a trade deal. This is the guy who was supposed to get us a budget. This was supposed to be a guy that was supposed to get our economic engines up and running. Now, we can say, well, that's fine. He'll make some announcements. But, I don't think that any of us are now of the view that we're going to see much in any way of development that is going to give Canadians the reassurance that we can turn things around. Migration is, of course, another major issue. Housing problems, another issue. We have, of course, a major imbalance in the Federation, which Grant can speak better to than I can, in which you have one region of the country that seems to be doing a very good job at taking from another region of the country, and that's creating an unnecessary tension that could be resolved if the federal government finally get on. And it's not just me saying this. It's got to, really fish or cut big when it comes to net zero. This pet plan has really hurt the country. And I'm not just talking about electric vehicles. I'm not talking about carbon taxes. We're talking about, of course, emission caps, et cetera. So as long as Mr. Carney continues to talk with no action, flying around the world and pretending it's all still about elbows up, well, I can tell you something. A lot of people can't reach their wallets anymore because there's nothing left in them because their elbows are way too high in the air.
Okay, so I've got a comment from the audience. Don Allen says, politics negates every advantage Canada has. We have horrible government. Thank you very much, Don, for that comment. I think that's, I guess what I'm asking is we still have the same government, Grant. Do you really have hope that we've got a change here? It's been 100 days, but is Dan fundamentally right in his analysis there?
Well, he's pretty close. I'm an eternal optimist, and I can only believe that much more common sense comes into politics. And there's an awful lot of I have an awful lot of friends in the Liberal Party, believe it or not, and I talk to some that are involved federally, and they know that there has to be some pretty wicked change to take place, and not wicked change, but good, solid change to create economic activity and wealth in the country. They're reluctant to admit that the carbon tax hurt. You can imagine on the supply chain that you look at coming into the country, the carbon tax is all the way up and so forth, and we have inflation in the food business. And I'm an agriculturist, and we need all the carbon in the ground that we can get, and a lot of them agree, but they don't know how to get out of it. right? So we'll keep a little bit of the carbon tax just to show our friends that we weren't entirely wrong. Well, they're entirely wrong. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence that you can show me that it's been a problem. It's been a problem in economic development and in the whole supply chain in terms of cost. Because if you put a carbon tax on me that is 3, 4, 5%, you'll find in some cases, and all my PhD work has been on supply chains in the food industry, somebody might add 2 or 3 more percent, and well, that was the carbon tax. And so they added and added and added. It ends up being a very inflationary and hasn't done a thing. And on top of it, good Lord, we are 1% of the world population and we're going to change the climate? Yes. China doesn't have a carbon tax. God bless us. India doesn't have a carbon tax. And here the federal Liberal government says we are going to change the environment in the entire world and penalize ourselves, our farmers, our ranchers, our business, all of our economic activity to help save China and India from polluting the world. I mean, it
is utterly bizarre.
Us, but I mean, hello, folks. I mean, it's so irrational. I mean, if the rest of the world was trying to do their part, maybe fair enough, and I still wouldn't believe in it. But for Canada to do it, honestly, Liberal governments need to shake their head. I mean, bless them, but you're just hurting us, and you're not saving the world. So why are you penalizing Canadians? I mean, it's irrational. It's
irrational. Brent K says, wake up. What do you say, Dan? Would you agree that the carbon tax jig is up?
Well, the net zero jig is up. And I really have to talk about that because that's really the mothership of all this nonsense.
Isn't it?
You don't like C69, C48, the no pipelines bill. You don't like the, energy, the impact assessment analysis, which is basically discouraging. We have created an environment in this country in which we told people who want to invest, who want to create, who want to provide the entrepreneurial spirit, go somewhere else. Get lost. Unless you follow our narrative, this was never the Liberal Party that I belong to. This is a creation of the 2015 gang out of Davos, who decided that they were going to use a particular narrative and use that as a sort of a battering ram against political opponents. Instead, what it did, it was a battering ram, a club used on the head of every consumer in this country. And it's not just the first carbon tax. The second carbon tax, the clean fuel standard, it's already 4 to 6 cents a liter. We're already looking at a depression in terms of the price of the fuel that we see because it takes 138 pennies to buy a US dollar. That's adding 25 cents a liter to the price of gasoline. We have tariffs on the United States, which has actually driven up food costs in this country. I don't know how impractical, unpragmatic, how detached from reality this particular Liberal group is, but I can tell you they haven't changed their status in my mind that they've been since Justin Trudeau, a cult that is being driven by a narrative that is driving Canada into the ground.
Okay, well, there you have it. Just so you at least know where Dan and our friend Grant Devine stand here. There's no mystery now. So I do want to turn to another very important news item, and that is that China has imposed a 75.8 whopping % duty on Canadian canola, prompting an industry calls for federal support. I mean, this is a very significant duty. I'm going to turn to you, Grant. What does this mean for us? Like this, what's happening in the industry? The industry must be reeling.
Well, it's really bad. It's really harmful, obviously, because we export canola, and one of the largest producers in the world, and it's tremendous revenue, tremendous income tax revenue for the province and the feds. Every time farmers make a lot of money, both levels tax them, and there's really no reason for the Chinese to do it other than we've caused it. I mean, the federal government, the Carney government, has said we're going to put a tax on electric vehicles coming in from China, and then you get the reaction. So Chinese says, "Well, whoop-de-doo, yeah. So I'll show you," and it's so unbalanced. We don't export electric vehicles around the world and make a bunch of money on it. They're losing money. And to use that as a lever and have the Canadian agriculture industry nailed to the cross because of it is just so irrational. I mean, it's I can't say enough bad things about it, except, I mean, hopefully they reverse it and they wake up. I know Premier Mullen and Premier Smith here have, stood up and said, for heaven's sake, Prime Minister, you got to deal with this. I mean, this is just dumber than a post. So, pardon me.
Yeah. So Dan, were you surprised by this? And what is the solution? I mean, it sounds like I know the head of the Canadian canola growers, Chris Davidson, has said these tariffs are clearly a political issue that needs a political resolution. Would you agree?
Well, they're meant to divide. And by the way, our enemy is not Donald Trump in the United States. I might not like the guy. I may not like what he's doing in terms of tariffs, but our real enemy is China. And we better smarten the hell up about that, because if you don't think that we're doing this because we don't want the Chinese to come in and dump their vehicles. They build them for $20,000. They're going to sell them here in Canada for $12,000. They want to dump. There's no doubt that that's their way of controlling manufacturing. They've done it in so many sectors. By the way, 100 years ago, the McTeagues came to a little town called Peterborough from Scotland. Peterborough was the largest manufacturing hub in Canada per capita. And it continued to be very, very large. No longer. There's no manufacturing there now. Basically, it's a senior citizens town. No offense to senior citizens. I'm almost one. But it seems to me that we've lost our way. And in terms of China, we've traded away for a few beans the entire farm. And the ending will not see the stock growing. What is going to happen is that we're going to see Carney have to make a choice next week to get the hell out of the subsidies and the creation of the EV mandates, which they're going to force people to drive over-glorified golf carts. By the way, I'm sure it goes very well in Grant Devine's province in the middle of winter, where they're totally someone driving down a combine with a 30,000-acre farm to try to find a place to plug it in somewhere in the middle of the farm. I digress. This is hurting the manufacturing sector in Ontario, and it's bludgeoning our farm sector in Western Canada. At the end of the day, we all share the prosperity of this country, but now we're sharing the despair. Mark Carney can't turn this around, and he's got to declare once and for all, not just his conflicts with China, but that what China is doing is as difficult and as wrong as what Trump is doing to Canada. I haven't heard a word from Mark Carney or the Liberals on China and what it's doing to hurt Canadian farmers, much less the Canadian dream out in Western Canada.
Well said.
Well said.
Yeah, no, this is a major, major issue. I want to shift now to another topic. It has to do with wildfires, and it's a very interesting story because I did highlight it briefly last week, but I wanted to share with you a very interesting story related to the use of AI images, artificial intelligence images, by certain parties on the internet to show so-called images of wildfires. We all realize that in Canada, every season we have several thousand wildfires. I didn't say hundreds, I meant thousands. And so many of them are portrayed in very simplistic terms. But it's interesting, the use of AI images. So I thought I'd just share them with you because I got some comments saying, what am I talking about? Well, there they are. The BC wildfire officials called out these fake AI images and said, shame on these people for doing this because it's miseducating people. It's misleading. So I thought I'd just share that. But I thought it was also interesting how it seems like every time we have wildfires, it's again another opportunity for the usual suspects to blame every incident on the climate narrative. Dan, what do you think about this? Like, this is just like, it's unbelievable the amount of histrionics we see out there in the public square. And I think, how does this help people get grounded in the science and issues? I mean, it's complex. You've got people, human beings starting them up. You've got issues where we've had misuse of fire management, where you have a lot of, frankly, deadwood in the forest that is just right there to start up. This is a complex issue. So what's your comment on this, Dan?
Cyber alarmism meet climate bedwetting. This is
climate
really,
bedwetting.
Well, of course it is. I mean, if you think that a molecule like CO2 is going to suddenly create and change the world, and Grant spoke to this very early, very well, what amounts to basically a speck of dust on a bridge being the cause of, needing to take that bridge down, to me, it makes no sense. The numbers alone mathematically don't make sense, and they don't make scientific proof either. But we know there's a lot of grift out there. There's a lot of money being spent on these kind of images that creates a hysteria. It distorts the reality. This is not Putin. This is actually happening in Canada. And we have a lot of green organizations that are behind this. And I'm not talking about the firebugs. because we tend to, ignore the fact that a lot of people who are doing these things actually go into those forests and set those fires. They're done deliberately so to reinforce the climate message, the message that somehow we're doing bad things. Got news for you. The 1920s and 1930s were a lot hotter, a lot more fires, a lot more damaging fires than we've seen today. And that water bomber, I saw in one of the AI pictures. Where the hell was that developed? In Canada. Why did we build water bombers? Because we know we have, from time to time, it gets hot in Canada. We need them for our forests, and we have a lot of them. So this does a disservice, but it also speaks to, I think, the general fraud that we're seeing from certain groups, from certain organizations who for 10 years have been trying to scare people into believing that what they exhale is somehow bad for the world and the environment.
Right on. So Grant, you've experienced this as a premier of a very large province, Saskatchewan. What's your comment about these wildfires?
Well, I think Dan is correct. In part, I have to acknowledge that a large number of the fires are set either accidentally or intentionally by people that are either visiting or live there. I am an honorary chief and have great respect for the Indigenous communities. But you have some people that take advantage of that. And I mean, I have met people that I know, and again, I say this respectfully, but I didn't like the way they talked to me about, there was a fire in my northern community and therefore I could move into Regina or Saskatoon and got 2 weeks and $500 and I had a bit of a holiday. Well, for some people, just some, that's an incentive. And we have evidence to show that the majority of the fires that are started by people. And if you look back 100 years from now or 200 years ago, pardon me, not in the future, but in the past, I mean, there were forest fires and it was caused by lightning, not by people. People who lived in the forest were very, very careful because there was no escape and there was no holiday to go to Saskatoon for 2 weeks and get $500. So I that may sound unfair on my part, but we have to acknowledge if people that visit those areas or people that live in those areas accidentally or intentionally, God forbid, start fires, I mean, that's a problem. And there's got to be serious consequences for somebody that starts a fire. And so I mean, you can have a lot of water bombers and you can have a lot of people working and lives at risk, etc. But if you are putting not only yourself, but others at risk because you've made a mistake or you're careless or you intentionally did it, there's got to be serious consequences. And I would wholeheartedly support that.
I agree. Bonnie Hughes says, I live in Manitoba and getting up every day to smoke is disgusting every morning for 3 weeks. I mean, that has a real impact on air quality right across the country and beyond. So, no, I agree with you. There needs to be serious consequences for those people that start them. It is very interesting. I do have a friend who's a senior person that operates helicopters in all kinds of sites across the country, and it's remarkable how many times they've seen people actually start them. But there doesn't seem to be any consequences. So again, I think it's one of these stories where people need to do their job as the police. I don't know all the details, but that's certainly one part of this complex issue. Elsewhere in the news, it was interesting. I noticed that it appears that a taxpayers watchdog is out, according to Blacklock's reporter. The Privy Council yesterday would not comment on recommendations of two parliamentary committees that it renew Yves Giroir's term as Chief Budget Officer. He's been a frequent critic of the Liberal cabinet, and he's out of office September 2nd. His office, has played, I think, a pretty important role in calling out a lot of the financial shenanigans the last few years. Does that concern you that he's on the way out, Dan? What's your comment on this?
Well, muzzling the watchdog is never a good thing, and it's certainly one who's been effective, and he's done his job with aplomb. I think he's raised issues that many Canadians may have found uncomfortable, but recognized very quickly that these are policies that they endorse, which had very negative consequences. But I'm also concerned about the timing. We have a prime minister who never produced a budget. Are we looking at a $140 billion deficit? Are we looking at a debt situation in this country that is spinning out of control, the likes of which we're likely to have bond rating agencies downgrade our credit? I'm talking about bond rating agencies that don't consider the CPP as somehow a collateral against this kind of debt. I think the timing is highly suspicious, but I think the Liberals have made it very clear they're not going to allow anybody who has opposed them, who has brought the truth about their government, their policies to bear. And so I'm not surprised by this at all. Who are they going to get? A lapdog? If you're going to take the cop off the beat and you're going to choose somebody, I mean, the elbows up crowd might be happy with this, but to the person that's likely to lose their job in the next couple of months, to the interest rates that are going to, for many people who are going to renew their mortgages that are going to go higher, not lower. If they go lower, they won't be low enough. I think this is a very bad omen. Mr. Giroux is in the prime of his career. Not because of what he says. Do I agree or disagree? I just think the timing of this for Mr. Carney is going to be highly suspicious. I don't expect the mainstream media to pay attention to this, but I sure as hell will. And I'll be talking to the tens of thousands of people who follow me on social media saying, why is this happening just before Mark Carney is forced to come out with a budget he knows is going to be an absolute disaster?
What are your comments, Grant?
Well, I just say ditto, Dan. That was
Okay.
well said. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we are borrowing money to pay for social services, and we're borrowing money to invest. So I looked at Mr. Carney saying that, well, we're going to look after the social side, but I'm going to borrow some money so we can invest in economic growth and so forth. So he's borrowing. And here we are getting deeper and deeper in debt. And I don't see a plan, certainly from what I talked about earlier, in economic growth. I mean, where are your growth sectors and how are you going to create the wealth? So if you don't encourage wealth, you're just going to be more and more in debt. And I don't see, I mean, I give him the benefit of the doubt. If he can show that he can create economic activity and create wealth, then we have something to tax and we can pay down the debt and we can start paying our bills. If we don't get there, then, I mean, it's the same old, same old. I mean, pardon me, but the Trudeau administration has been doing it. And it's, I mean, it looks like it's going to be the same. Hopefully it isn't. And his plan will work. But I mean, again, as Dan pointed out, we haven't had a budget. And if we're going to see this budget, unless there's, I mean, it's going to be one, pretty tricky looking budget. I mean, it could be a disaster, but I'll hold my breath.
Okay, so this is the point I guess I'm trying to make based on this fact, this reality of this gentleman's term coming to an end on September 2nd, which is just around the corner, is that it's part of this pattern of institutions not being empowered to do their job as they were designed, right? Like, we don't have a parliament sitting. It had been prorogued. It sat briefly. We don't have the legacy media firing on all cylinders because it's so funded. We have a situation where we don't have a budget as that's been outlined. I hope, Dan, you are absolutely wrong that it's going to be did you say $140 billion?
Yeah.
I mean, that is an order of magnitude. What is it? 2.5 times where the Trudeau government was. I hope that's wrong. And that doesn't even include other provinces. So we've got a number of institutions here, and that isn't just about the guy in that office. It's the role. As you know, it's a check in terms of being able to create the conditions where we spend money wisely so that we can generate and move this economy forward and do that kind of wealth creation, Grant, as you so aptly summarize. So for me, these are just another set of flags that show we've got to wake up and realize that that's maybe not a good sign. So am I being too dramatic here, Dan, in my comment?
No. Look, I am trying to find the positive in all of this and try to find the way out, but I have to agree that there is a set of circumstances in which we are trying to condition very bad news would otherwise be a way of sugarcoating what is being an economic decline on every front. We can't say mining is doing better, agriculture is doing better, manufacturing is doing better, the energy sector is doing better. Nothing seems to be working. Don't take my word for it. Kids who try to find employment this summer have found it extraordinarily difficult. Many of them cannot compete with what's out there. We've created a real problem, as I mentioned earlier, with migration, and it's not fair to Canadians, but it's certainly not fair to new people who've come to this country with greater expectations. We have despoiled the ability to show promise of a better, brighter future for almost everybody. And I think when we have the elbows up group, my generation of folks going around saying, I'm looked after, I got my pension, I got my nice federal civil service job, to hell with the rest of you. Well, we are saying that we're putting a burden on the next generation, maybe even the generation after that, for which we had no right and we had every obligation. I don't know of any previous generation that never tried to make the next generation better for the future. This is the first generation that's decided selfishly to say no. And I don't say that collectively. That's not fair to everybody. But I can tell you, I saw them. I knocked on doors. I told them, look, I'm a former Liberal member, cabinet. If I'm not voting for these people because of what they've done to the economy, why the hell are you? And you can just see them. Oh, well, I have my own reasons for doing it. It's DEI, it's ESG, it's all sorts of other things. At the end of the day, it's selfish and it's irresponsible, and it's got to end. And we need to have some way of stopping the deception of a government that seems to be able to cast itself as being the best thing since sliced bread.
Okay, wow. So how many budgets in your day, Grant Devine, did you table as Premier of Saskatchewan? And would you not have had a budget for, what is it now, a year and a half?
Well, I guess we tabled, I was in 11 years, so it would be 11 budgets, and I had deficits. The previous administration had nationalized potash and oil and uranium. And so as an economist, I said, I have to create wealth. So we built upgraders, we built fertilizer plants, we invested in money in economic activity. And so today, years later, you see the wealth creation in the province of Saskatchewan. And so I was criticized for having deficits. And I said, well, I don't have any money to fix this, but I'm going to invest. So I turned what was crown corporations into private sectors, and they created wealth. And if you look at the potash industry and oil and gas and fertilizer, I mean, it really helps us. I would go back to the point that if you go to people in Eastern Canada, and I have a lot of friends and relatives in the Maritimes and in Ontario, Quebec, and say, we're going to want to balance the budget in Canada. Do you have extra money here? And they'll just look at you and stare. I mean, they don't. I mean, the provincial governments don't have extra money. The people don't have extra money. And say, do you think we should have a move towards a balanced budget in Canada? And they'd say, well, of course. Well, then if you don't have the money, how are we going to balance the budget? And they say, well, I guess we get it from someplace else. Yeah, and now you say, exactly. And you want those other places that create wealth and money to prosper so that they can help you. The transfer payments going to Eastern Canada are remarkable. That we create all this wealth and we're not giving credit for it. So you turn around and I ask them politically, why would you vote if you don't have any money? Why would you vote for an administration that doesn't have any money and has no idea how it's going to create money when you're hurting the very jurisdictions that create wealth? I mean, you could campaign through Eastern Canada and say, how are you going to fix this? I mean, for heaven's sakes, think about it. You don't have the money. The money's out west. You penalize the money. You get great transfers, and you keep putting dampers on the very people that create the economic activity that would save your bacon, save your home, and save the country. And you could campaign on that. That's why it's so amazing that all of a sudden, all these Eastern people who look like they were going to vote Conservatives, they vote Liberal for what? A gift. A gift. What do they think? Is that a magic? I mean, I would go to speak to any one of them and say, how did you think you're going to have your children survive? As Dan points out, where are the jobs in the Maritimes? Where are the jobs in here? There are jobs here in economic activity, in agriculture, oil and gas, electric, potash, etc. You know, I mean, it's so irrational that these people will vote for some sort of dream and they don't have any money and they don't know where they're going to get it. And the very people that could help them, they deny. Yeah, it's a little frustrating, Dan.
It is. No, it's a fascinating discussion because, yeah. So, it's just interesting. I've got a comment from the audience. Keister says it's time for a new model, and I'm wondering if Keister's, I imagine that's not their proper name, is onto something. We have a status quo in this country of operating that's not about invigorating and building out the economic model, because that's the foundation for our quality of life for not only ourselves but our children and our grandchildren. So in this context, we need some pretty transformative ideas. And I know I've been going through some news here, so it's been an interesting foil to go through it. And I want to just share with you another point in the news, and that has to do with Air Canada. You may know that there's been a Air Canada attendance strike, and I think that's coming to a close here. But what's the significance of that? Because I look, there's a lot of labor disruption that's emerging in this country, even though we have a lot of economic uncertainty. I know that within the private sector, I'm hearing a lot of persons putting a lot of major things on hold until they kind of know what's up or down in terms of a lot of issues, including trade. What's the significance of this, again, another labor action that's happening here during this time of economic uncertainty? Who wants to take that one? Grant? Dan?
Well, I'll just take
go
a
ahead.
run at it. As you suffer economically, everybody suffers. And if you look at the profitability of major institutions, airlines, and others, if they're beginning to suffer, their employees suffer. So if young people that start and they go into the airline business as a stewardess or as an employee, I mean, they're not paid well. They're not paid decently. And so you find it, and you're going to find this in other industries, because as your economy begins to hurt, there's a ripple effect. And it not only affects the airlines, but it affects others. And so you start to penny pinch because you have to make a go. And so either you underpay people, or you don't pay them, or you lay them off, and then the combination sort of multiplies. So I think it's a symbol of, as we were talking earlier, you and I and Dan, about, if the country is not on a sound economic footing, the consequences will show up in every industry, every sector, whether you're really well educated or just beginning in the labor force or looking for a job. All of those things start to back up. And I think the strike by the Air Canada employees is a symbol of that problem. And they're not going to be the only ones.
I think you're onto something. Again, another pattern, another symptom, as you say, of deeper issues. Do you agree with that, Dan?
Yeah, of course. And I think the context is extremely important, but I think a lot of people realize, when you're not paying people for work that they're doing, that seems to be, no matter what the current economic conditions are, that seems to be class A unfair. And there's, of course, a lot of attention given to this. It's a big airline. It's almost monopolistic if you look at some of the other competitors and the few that are there. I was involved with that file many, many years ago. But I was also deeply concerned by the overreaction of the Minister of Labor, who within 7 hours of the decision they were likely going to go on a strike, decided to order them back to work. Where was the same resolve when it came to, the effect of the rail strikes, both CN and as we saw with, potential threats on the postal front? There's a lot of issues here that can't be resolved quickly, but for governments to take an imprudent position, which is say go very quickly, and then find even the airline itself turn around and say, yeah, okay, we'll cut a deal because we know this really looks bad, is another estimation, another example of just how bad things and the advice that the current government is getting and giving is not a very sound one, not one that raises a lot of confidence. But I do say this is a constituency of airline workers who I think to a large extent we're not known to be big conservatives. But I find it funny. I know Leanne Rood is an MP from the Goderich region of Ontario. Last year, she put a bill C-408, I think.
Yes, that's right.
4-0 up here, saying you got to pay these people what they're worth. You can't, you know, if you're not going to pay them, they're likely not to show up. But you can't have them show up and not pay them. And she said that should be outlawed. It was a conservative that brought this up, not a liberal, not a New Democrat. Where the hell were they? I mean, the reality here is that this has made them look like hypocrites. And I think in the long run, it also makes them look as if they're extraordinarily incompetent, having rushed to a decision that at the end of the day, I think most Canadians realize they shouldn't have done in the first place.
Right on. Trent says the problem was flight attendants don't get paid unless they're in the air. I think that's kind of what you're both alluding to. But yeah, no, it's important that our country run well. And whether that's Canada Post, airlines, all kinds of elements of our economy need to be moving forward. Now, it's interesting. I want to highlight this, and this is a different part of the news here. An interesting story came up this past week, and I was actually quite befuddled by it. It was reported in Blacklock's Reporter. It said that Parks Canada yesterday hurriedly issued a public designation of Brian Mulroney as a National Historic Person. It followed disclosures. The agency's Historic Sites and Monuments Board voted in secret a session to delay for 25 years, a public honor for the late Prime Minister that was previously awarded promptly to his Liberal predecessors. I was very disturbed to hear this, and I know that the Prime Minister's son also responded to this on behalf of the family, I think in some measure, expressing, frankly, disappointment, to put it politely. Now, Grant Devine, you knew Brian Mulroney well, and I can't speak for you, Dan, but I know that I just found this bizarre that there would be that kind of delay here. And I don't mean this in any partisan way whatsoever, but what the heck is going on here? When you have a Parks Canada somehow debating about whether or not a prime minister, regardless of whether you agreed with him or her, would be delayed as being recognized as a National Historic Person.
Well, it's partisan. I mean, it's unfair. I had a great relationship with Brian Mulroney and Don Mazinkowski and Bill McKnight and Charlie Mayer, and we did a lot of really interesting, solid things together, and building, I mean, moving a million acres into Treaty 6. Imagine a million acres into Treaty 6, and that was the Prime Minister of Canada that helped do that and make it happen. And for the Indigenous community, it was, one in a lifetime. And in negotiating a better trade deal, one of the first with the United States, which was happy. Everybody was happy, United States, Mexico, and Canada. And the support of the agriculture industry in Western Canada. And, in part, that's Don Mazinkowski, Bill McKnight, and others like him that stood up for the West. But, I mean, I respected the Prime Minister very, very much. He was a good, solid Canadian. And to play with something like this, I mean, he's a Canadian and he's been a Prime Minister. I mean, I visited with the first Trudeau and got along with him fine, even if we disagreed. I've visited with, obviously Alan Blakeney and Roy Romano, and we obviously disagreed, but we were respectful. I sat on the Board of Governors with Roy Romano, and we had an interesting conversation, disagreed about a lot of things, but you could say we're actually political friends. So to play these kinds of games is, I find it very, very cheap. I mean, obviously I don't like it.
What do you say, Dan? Is this partisan politics in some form? What is it? I don't understand it.
It's despicable. It's, I'm a Liberal, 18-year member of Parliament, Liberal Party. I didn't necessarily agree with Brian Mulroney, but I respect the fact that he won a majority, one of the largest in history, that he did some great things for the country. Like it or not, and my Liberals at the time, I fought with them. He got it right on the free trade agreement, and it created years of prosperity for the country on a number of fronts. It created enormous opportunities for a lot of Canadians on both sides of the border. The Montreal Protocol on certain gases, national reconciliation, and I mean not in terms of groups, but we're trying to bring the country together. We might fault the man for taking the position that he did, but we cannot fault him for his best interest in putting the country first. And for a couple of partisan folks in the old days wearing patches and smoking cigars, wearing desert boots, I'm using the 1960s analogy of a bunch of old party bureaucrats trying to play these bloody partisan games. Listen, you're too old to be trendy. Get the hell off, because I'll tell you something, it's going to come back. I hope it doesn't happen anytime soon. Jean Chrétien, my boss, will perhaps die at some point. Are we going to punt down the street for 25 years? We're going to do the same. Did we do the same for Pierre Trudeau or Lester B. Pearson? No damn way. These people should all be outed and fired. And for whatever reason that we've decided to come to our senses, thank goodness it's happened, but it's a symptom of a much bigger problem. Our partisanship is deep. And unfortunately, it's divisive. And these people do not have either Canadians who stood up for this country or the country's larger interests. That is the diversity of the country interested at heart. So I think it's very un-Canadian what they've done. And I think they should be ashamed of themselves for doing it.
I like that. It's not the Canadian way. We've got to rise above party to say, how are we serving Canada? And so I think that's very well said. And I think it's good to discuss that, because I think it's a story that a lot of people would have missed as we think about turning around our country. And you might ask, well, what does that have to do with turning around our country? Because again, this is a symptom of a deeper issue. We're missing the boat in terms of building the country. You can't build it if you're so narrowly partisan. You can't think straight to serve the larger country. So I want to turn now to a very interesting issue that's come up big time this last week or two, and that has to do with the Russian-Ukrainian war. This is a tragedy of mammoth proportions. One of the things that struck me in the news was the revelation of how many people are dying in this conflict. There you have President Donald Trump trying to bring together the elusive Putin as well as Zelensky. And it's interesting. I understand, and it's part of the concern I have, is that some 650,000 Ukrainians alone have died in this war. I can't imagine those casualties. And so I look at this, and I know there's been a lot of chatter within the legacy media saying, how is Donald Trump pursuing peace here? Because I think there's lives at stake. And there you have them meeting at the White House. You've got them lined up with different European actors that don't seem to do much. But it's interesting in that context. I don't see Canada there. Am I looking for someone that should be there or not? I mean, Dan, you were a former parliamentary secretary and former in foreign relations. What's your comment on that?
Well, it's a complete slap in the face. I think it's an obvious recognition that Canada's prowess, its ability to punch above its weight, is no longer there. We are a bit player in and having, I think, for whatever reason, taken a number of sides. I think like in provinces like Grant Devine's and having been premier during a time, perhaps a golden era, where Canada was always the leader when it came to international events. Lester B. Pearson won his Nobel Prize because we were able to move a couple of old aircraft carriers into what was then the Suez Canal. There was a time in which we made sure that despite our lack of strength and resources, we made the most of it. And I think here we've despoiled that. We've traded that away. It's not about taking sides here. It's also recognizing there has to be, in this particular game here, an understanding that Donald Trump doesn't like Canada, doesn't like Mark Carney, doesn't like the Canadian government and its positions. We've spent $20-30 billion on Ukraine. It's okay to take sides, but we also have to be objective about what this really means. Are there conditions, and I wasn't there, but Grant Devine was, are there conditions that we made to Russia when the walls came down and when there was a change in regime there in which the Communist Party collapsed? Did we make undertakings that we would not do certain things, recognize certain things, and do things that would be antagonistic? I'm not taking one side or another, but I think the recognition here is that Canada may not have been relevant only because it was pretty clear that we couldn't take a position other than saying Ukraine right, Russia wrong, absolutely, without any reservation. That's never been our position in the past, certainly when it came to being between two warring sides. I don't suggest we should or could have, but the position that we took, the narratives that we've taken in the past several years, I think lack balance. That's one of the reasons why no one wants a country that has taken one side in a particular discussion seriously in an environment where you want to get both together.
Okay, well said. Pardon me, Grant Devine, does this concern you that Canada's not kind of present on the world stage, really taking an active role in these kinds of discussions? Any comment?
Well, I don't know that we're strong enough now economically, let alone politically, to take a side. But I mean, I'm pretty hard over anti-Russian in their move to, take over Ukraine. I mean, it's I mean, they stepped in there and they're killing thousands and thousands of people. Russia's economy is the size of California. All right. I mean, they're a big country geographically, but other than oil and gas, it's a wreck. I mean, they're not in good shape. So what the hell we're doing, kind of cozying up to them and say that you got to say it's, we'll let you have so much of Ukraine just because you want it, just because you're a dictator. You can't argue in Russia in terms of a democratic voice. They'll put you in jail or do worse. So, I mean, I'm no fan of Russia. And the dictator, I'm no fan of dictatorships. We treat him like he's sort of a normal democratic guy. He's not. He's not to be trusted. He visits with Trump. He says, we're going to get something done. And then he goes and kills a bunch of Ukrainians at the same night. I mean, wake up and smell the coffee here, boys and girls. This guy is evil. He's a tyrant. He should be in jail. I mean, whatever. But he's no help to anybody except himself. And he's just causing a lot of harm. And to be intimidated by the size of Russia, as I said, with an economy like one of the states in the U.S. Sure, he has nuclear power. Well, that's a different smoke altogether. You don't want to be overly intimidated, but respectful of that because he's that goofy. But you can't just let him start. If it isn't this country, it'll be another country, or it'll be another one, or something else. So I'm very impatient with the way we've treated Putin. I think. I think Trump's got some learning to do with respect to somebody that's dangerous. And I don't think he's really shown what he can. In many other cases, he's taken a real strong leadership, particularly in the defense of the U.S. economy. Fair enough. And I see why he's doing that. And in the general reduction of tariffs. I mean, if you can get them all down to 15% worldwide, and that's an honorable objective, great. But him tinkering around with Putin, I mean, he's got to get tough.
Well, let's hope that peace can come together for all sides and people concerned. It is a complex issue, and I'm half reluctant for bringing that one up because it is so complex. It is interesting that part of the backstop to Russia, I did notice this in terms of the trading of commodities, was that as Europeans have tried to walk away from energy, like importing energy from Russia, it makes a number of points, one of which is surely Canada can come to the table to export more energy to the European market, and that becomes a security issue. But the second point that I notice is that any backing away from Russian imports of oil and gas to Europe has been backstopped by a very interesting country called, what is it? Oh yeah, the People's Republic of China. So I think that it again, underlines the importance of Canada as a energy supplier, for all kinds of commodities that can help stabilize the world. And I think that's where Canada's role can be, is that we can be an effective middle power if we so choose to actually be not only in the trading of commodities that can stabilize these kinds of relationships, but frankly, come to the table as a full NATO partner. I mean, we've been criticized for years that we have been kind of a freeloader in terms of the NATO partnership. So maybe this is again another reckoning for Canada. Any comment?
David, let me interrupt. I agree. I think you've nailed it. If we build pipelines so we can get liquefied natural gas into Europe, it would make a world of difference, and it would be one of the most recognized successful things that Canadians could do. One, in backing off, they're paying $12 an MCF for gas there, and we pay $3. I mean, it would just help them immensely. Secondly, it would kick Putin in the shins, which would be a very good thing. It would be a wake-up call to India and China, who's been backing them up. So, I mean, and then the Canadian Prime Minister could stand and say, well, I'm really doing my part because we have energy and food. We're going to share it with you. We can get our act together to build a pipeline. Show Europeans that we're not only there in the First and Second World War, but we're in this war like nobody else can. I mean, United States could do some of that, but it needs its oil and gas. We have surplus. We have no end of natural gas, tens of thousands of years. I mean, we could make a huge difference. And, you know, we'll wonder if we should visit. You nailed it. Get on.
All right. So let's get on with those exports. But I like how it's very interesting, you know, like we've gotten into this conversation with the audience and certainly with the Honorable Grant Devine, former Premier of Saskatchewan, and also the Honorable Dan McTeague, with the Liberal governments of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. And as we get into the tail end of our conversation, I just want to thank everybody for their comments and questions. I urge you to thank the to like the program, pardon me, and you know, we really appreciate your comments very much. The theme has really been interesting because we've highlighted news stories, but we've kind of connected the dots again on the theme of how do we renew this country to get it on a path of growth. And so I want to share 12 policy ideas for a renewed Canada. We've tabled this several times at Frontier, and it's kind of, some would say it's a little bit of motherhood and apple pie here. But, you know, it's amazing how infrequent this common sense is on the public policy stage, as we still are talking about open and free internal markets. That's number one on that list. We've got a whole nother one, like modernize federal assets and crown corporations, e.g. sell them off. Are there things there on that list, gentlemen, that particularly strike you as being very urgent? If you were the secret advisor behind the doors with our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, or any of the premiers in this country, what would be the top two or three that you think we need to do, given your experience in government? Any comment on that? Who wants to go first?
Grant, I'll try that one. There are several very good ones here. A couple of I thought would, number two is obviously one that's near and dear to my heart, and that I think of every Canadian wants a job. I think there is, of course, the issue of, I'm in Toronto, a law and order drug policies, extraordinarily significant. The number of break-ins, concerns about, drug and theft of vehicles, all of these things with concern about bail. There's a sense that the system is no longer able to protect the very social contract that we have, that is to protect people in exchange for them giving up their arms and or defending themselves. I think the issue of sovereignty is also not just in terms of, hey, spend more money on national defense. It's also, become relevant again. Grant pointed this out, selling LNG to the rest of the world. We lost 17 projects. Imagine where Canada would be today if it had some of those, not just one, but 17 of them across the country, selling east and west, and basically being able to tell the Venezuelas and the Russias and the Irans of this world, if you want to mess up the world, that's fine, but we'll gladly sell to the Indias and the Chinas and the South Koreas and the Japans and all of Europe as an alternative. And we could do that. I know that because in the time in which Grant was premier, the time in which I was an MP, we sold maybe 1 or 2 million barrels a day. That was it. But because of pipeline disposition, we were able to double that number. We could triple that number. We have enough natural resources that the world wants. Forget the trendiness, forget the soup of the day, whatever the climate narrative is. The world wants energy, and they want Canadian energy if they can get it. But we keep saying no. We have to answer the question, why are we blocking all this?
Right on. Grant, any comment? What would your top priorities be?
Well, I didn't read all of them, but one of them, I think you could significantly cut the size of governments, particularly the federal government. I think they've added 100 to 200,000 employees in the federal government, one to, collect the carbon tax and then to give it back and so forth. But bureaucracy, the size of government is eating into our ability to do many other things. So you can have a pretty efficient government, but you don't have to have a bloated government. So everybody's hiring an assistant to an assistant to an assistant, and then new programs, and the taxpayer has to pay for that. So if you're not, creating wealth to add these new, a couple 100,000 public employees at the federal level costs money. Well, where does the money come? It sure as hell doesn't come from the Maritimes. So it's coming from some place that's creating economic activity. Again, it's the same old, but I think the size of government across the place, all governments, it's tempting to see your little government bureaucracy, whether it's a department of this or that, grow. But who's paying for it, right? That's the interesting thing. And I think some serious efforts could be made there, particularly at the federal level. If the prime minister wants to show he's serious, he could say, "By George, I got some real savings here that I can show the Canadian public." So that's one of them. But generally, I think we've touched on an awful lot of the economic policies of the day that perhaps we could improve.
Right on. Robert says, "Get on." Oh, I just missed the comment there, Madam Producer. Get on with the pipelines, border security, and crime reduction as priorities. So here, we've had a very far-reaching conversation today, and I want to thank both Dan McTeague for joining us and the Honorable Grant Devine. It's been a powerful conversation. And also with our audience, I want to thank you all for your conversation and comments. So thank you for joining us today for this conversation, Dan and Grant.
Great to be here, David. Thank you very much, Grant.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed it, and I appreciate Dan's honesty. It's difficult to criticize a Liberal government if you've been a Liberal cabinet minister, and I can really appreciate it. I will point out in my closing that my grandparents were immigrants. One was a strong CCFer, and he believed in Tommy Douglas because he helped save the farm. The other was a right-wing Liberal, and one of them at least voted for Diefenbaker. So I grew up fearing both sides. That's why I was progressive conservative, right?
Well,
I've always loved Grant's comments because in my little riding in Pickering, we had the first nuclear reactors in North America, and guess where all that uranium came from? Thank you, Grant.
Wow.
Pleasure to be with you.
So this panel discussion illustrates how we can work together, join hands as we all seek to build a better country called Canada. So thanks again, everybody, for your participation, and be sure to join our conversation next week on Thursday on Leaders on the Frontier Live.
Thank you for watching Leaders on